So up next is one of Walmart's own, Vernon Habersetzer. He can come on out. Vernon is one of our threat hunt team leads. So we're going to be talking about hunting threats at scale. I could bore you all day. I really geek out on Walmart scale facts. It's huge, and I'm still figuring out how huge it is. Come find me somewhere, and I'll blow your mind. And he will probably blow your mind 10 times more. So one of Vernon's primary focuses is developing new methodologies. So we work on new things because we have to be ahead of the bad guys, right? So we're going to have an awesome talk. I'm excited because I already saw the slides. So Vernon, thank you very much for coming up.
Thanks, Tim.
And let's give him a round of applause and get him started.
Appreciate it.
Forward, back.
Cool, thank you. All right. Everybody having fun so far? Yeah? All right, well, that's a tough act to follow, so hopefully I won't put you guys to sleep. Vernon Habersetzer, I've been with Walmart a total of about 10 years. Covers the course of incident response, computer forensics, and threat hunting most recently. And so, as you can imagine, Walmart's got kind of a large network, right? It's all over the planet. And instead of thinking of threat hunting as shooting fish in a barrel in a small network, it's more like trying to find a bad sardine in the ocean, it can feel like. And so today I wanted to share some of the ways that we are working on to do threat hunting in a massive network. And these things can be applied to any environment, I would say, at almost no cost. So I'm not going to be talking about specific products. It's more of a hunting methodology, right? It's a state of mind to think about when you're looking for threats in a huge environment. So with that, we're going to get a little bit into very lightly touch on probability theory and Sesame Street. So those are going to work with me here. All right, so I was trying to think of a way to illustrate the size of a large network that I'm talking about. All right, so this picture, and I wasn't sure how it would render being projected like this, but this picture is 1,000 pixels wide by 1,000 pixels tall. So it's exactly 1 megapixel image, right? If every pixel in that picture represented an IP address, that's what I'm talking about, right? And you're trying to find a threat within that picture, 1 pixel. And I don't think you can even see the pixels on the screen, right? And so to illustrate that just a little bit more, in the glow of the light of the Space Needle, you could fit 150 servers, right? That's how, so imagine how many boxes are living over this giant network, okay? And so, again, tasked with threat hunting. How are you going to know when one of those things is acting out of line, right? And by the way, you've only got about 5 hours to do this in a day. On a good day, right? You have meetings, emails, projects, fires come up. And you're tasked with finding threats in this massive network. And by the way, you look at 1 pixel and you go, okay, it's fine. 30 seconds later, that pixel gets compromised. You're not going to find it until the next time around, right? If you were to look at everything. So it's a big challenge. And so the hunter's goal should be to make it hard for the adversary to hide, right? And there's a lot of ways to do that. But thinking in terms of the scale, it can be kind of difficult. So it's not as easy as aiming a single tool at an environment and going, okay, there's the bad guy. He can't hide anymore, right? If it were that easy, I wouldn't be up here talking to you guys today. So sometimes we get what a guy on my team termed hunter's block. I love that term, right? Like writer's block. It's like, I don't know, I need a new idea because this one I'm coming up with is kind of not producing the results I want. I need a new idea. So I would say the focus should be, for anybody doing threat hunting, is to focus on methods that, what I say, transcend attack specifics. So instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to go after this one exact exploit method, this certain traffic pattern that I know this certain malware transmits, that's getting down in the weeds to a point that it'll be really, really difficult to cover all the different things you should possibly look for, right? It's an enormous task. There's so many attack methods and so many attack tools and traffic characteristics. So if we could focus on things that transcend all that, right? Step back a level, you can find things that you didn't even know were to look for, right? So that's what we're going to walk through today. So think about the scale, right? The picture of the Space Needle, the Seattle skyline, how every pixel being a machine, the numbers appear to be against you, right? There's just so much to look at. There's petabytes and petabytes of data to sift through. You've only got a few hours in a day, right? So the key is to use the numbers to your advantage. Don't let them get the best of you. Use them to your advantage. So Girolamo Cardano, anybody here ever heard of this guy? I'll be really surprised if any hands go up. Okay. All right, so he knew we'd be threat hunting someday, even though he lived back in the 16th century. This guy was a visionary. So the mathematical theory, this is Wikipedia, mathematical theory of probability has its roots in attempts to analyze games of chance by this guy back in the 16th century. So flip a coin 1,000 times, the result should end up what you expect the average to be. So the law of large numbers is really what Girolamo kind of owns, and stay with me here, don't fall asleep yet. So according to the law, right, the average of the results obtained from a large number of trials should be close to the expected value, and it'll become closer to that value the more trials are performed. Okay, so if we take that law and we tweak it a little bit, we apply it to threat hunting. Let's change. Let's say the average of the results obtained from a large number of events, right? Event being, let's say, an event in an event log, a packet going across the network. The more of those you look at, the closer they should become to the expected value of benign, okay? And the more you analyze, the closer and closer it should be, the average of what you're finding. The translation here is most events should be benign. You take a slice, a cross-section of a network or an endpoint, a whole bunch of endpoints, that the behaviors you're seeing should probably be benign. If not, your network is completely eaten up with compromise and you're probably not going to be in business anymore, right? So if everybody agrees that most stuff on a network, on an endpoint, should be benign, it makes sense that we should probably focus on rare things, right? And so start there. That's the premise. And that's what I try to drive home on my team all the time is focus on rarity. We are in a massive network. If something happens bad, it's probably going to be a rare behavior within the massive amount of normal, okay? So back when I was about 3 or 4, I started training in threat hunting. Sesame Street, come on. Which one of these things is not like the others, right? This is the concept we're gonna run with here. If I said, I'm gonna go look for kids in uniforms that wear purple pants and a green shirt, I didn't find the adversary. But if I said, well, show me which one of these things is not like the others, right, it's obvious, right? I didn't know to look for a kid in yellow pants, black top, right? But there it is in front of me, okay? So keep that in mind. It's silly, but it'll work. So what if you could tell if a certain asset in your network, let's say domain controller or whatnot, started acting differently than all the others in that group of assets, right? What if it started talking over a new protocol or a new port and network segment? It started talking to a type of host it never talks to, right? Wouldn't you want to know that here? Does anybody have an interest in knowing how you could spot that in your network? For almost free, almost nothing. Okay, all right. So, sorry. Focus on the type of server asset that would be critical to your environment. Every business is different, right? Everybody's got their own kind of things that they want to protect. Okay, so remember the light bulb. If we isolate that light bulb, 150 servers could fit in it, remember? All right, so this is just 150 servers. Let's say these are domain controllers, all right? Could you spot the one box doing something that none of the others are doing? How about now? This is 150 little graphics that are popping up right now. How about now, right? It's crazy amount. That's 150. That's just the light of the Space Needle, right? Okay, now you still got the entire network to deal with. This is just one group of servers. So what if you got a few of these that start beaconing out to a domain? And I made that up, by the way. I hope it's not registered and something. But anyway, a few of these start beaconing out. Let's say you got a zip file leaving one of these through SMB. Would you know that? Or you got a box that had a large upload to Dropbox. One of your domain controllers started uploading something there. Maybe a single file executable got copied to one of the domain controllers. Would you know it? How about RDP from a software developer's machine? Right? That's not normal. Why would a developer be RDPing into a domain controller? Would you know these things happened? Could you know? All right, this is just one group of servers in a speck of your network. All right, so that's what we're going to get to. The problem is, even if you have a tool like Deep Packet Inspection or NetFlow, a lot of people don't know how to use that data to find those rare behaviors, and that's what I want to talk about today. So a lot of time I'm spending is just on the concept of the need to do this and make sure everybody understands that that's an important thing. So how to find the rare events, okay? This is where we're going to get into the how. We know we need to do it. So depending on what kind of rare behaviors you're wanting to find, you're going to have different types of data, right? Web-based threats, proxy logs, or full packets are very useful. I'm sure any organization probably has proxy logs to use, so that's a good starting point. It's usually already there. You don't have to pay to store that again. For persistence, for rare persistence type behaviors, you're going to have something off the endpoint, some kind of logs or artifacts. And for lateral movement, internal full packets, NetFlow system, anything that records a connection from point A to point B is something you could utilize to do this. And even artifacts off the endpoint like registry values and running processes. So anything that is you consistently can get from a bunch of endpoints, that's your source. So first we're going to do is, this goes a little bit against what I talked about earlier, defining the suspect behavior. We're going to start with one. I'm going to mention one that is a little against what I said about knowing what to look for and only looking for that. But stay with me here. All right, so another way to do this is to tag all the assets in your environment as best as you can, and then find the outliers by protocol, IP, network, that kind of thing. The last one is my favorite we're going to get at the end, whereas you're tagging all the assets in your environment, and then you're defining a whole lot of characteristics of the network or the endpoint, and then you're having the system tell you what is the rare behavior without you knowing what to go after, all right? That'll make more sense in a minute here. These last two require asset tagging, though. You've got to have a handle on what are your domain controllers, what are your exchange servers, what are your web servers, your DNS servers, whatever. You have to define all that as best you can. The more you can do that, the more you can find odd behaviors. So we're going to start on the top one, and we are going to talk about just, C2 is what we're going to talk about to start with. But first thing, it's kind of a three-step program. Define the behavior. All right, we'll get into that in just a second. For each behavior, you're going to look at the results where there's only a few machines doing that behavior, okay? You're going to triage those, and then you're going to go back, tune the rules, filter out things that are benign, and then you're going to go back to step one. Go back and look at the results again. Keep doing that, right? And then as you have more time, you define more behaviors. And so that's an approach that I've taken for years now, and it does work. You can find things. But it kind of gets into that box of, well, if it doesn't match the behavior I defined, I'm not going to see it, right? So you therefore have to have all this perfect logic. I can't tell you how many hours refining command and control detection logic, right? There's just so many variables in there, a lot of good traffic that matches the same characteristics. It's a difficult thing, right? And it made me realize that, you know what, we need a better method that is more scalable, and it doesn't have to match what I came up with as an idea for that kind of behavior. So, all right, so let's assume we've got a database table named Proxy Logs, all right? And this is just a really short example. You've got IP sources, we got a host column for the domains, and we've got the action type, the method, right? Okay, if you're looking at your Proxy Logs, you have millions of rows. Oh, what do you do with that? How do you know which ones are good, which ones are bad? So first thing we're going to do is utilize the count and distinct functions. So Sesame Street here to help me again. And by the way, these examples of SQL queries, it doesn't match. I use a different database system than general just SQL Server. So this syntax may not be exactly right, but you'll get the idea. What we're going to do here is we're going to do a select on the host, which was the domain, right? And then a count of distinct IP sources. And the count distinct are that is the basis for everything I'm talking about today. From packet, sorry, this should be proxy log, sorry. Insert bad behavior here. Okay, so you have things that are, this is just some quick and dirty command and control characteristic. A lot of command and control tends to exhibit, right? There's a post with no get, there's no refer, no graphics files usually, because it's usually not a human interaction. How many times you go to a web page and there's no graphics, right? So you kill the graphics. Now I have seen C2 using PNGs, so there's exceptions, right? Well, this is just for an example though. So we're selecting the domains and how many machines are doing that, or going to that domain where these characteristics match. So now, instead of having just your proxy logs, that, where do I start? Your results start looking like this, right? What we have, this is how many machines are going to each of these domains where that C2 logic matched. Okay, well, obviously our unicorns are down here at the bottom. We got 3 machines going here and 5 to this one, right? That's an anomaly, right? That stands out really clearly now. So you'll have to start setting thresholds to go, okay, well, how many machines going to a domain that match this characteristic are okay? We're going to say, well, say it's 20 or more, or 10 or more, or maybe it's 50. It just depends. You have to kind of feel out that number for what that is. You'll see kind of a drop-off. And then you'll start unveiling command and control channels, things that are very rare. You have an environment with 1 million IP addresses, and you got 3 machines doing a post, no get, no refer, no graphic files to a domain. That's interesting, right? And it may just be a crummy app someone's installed. It may be a Chrome extension, you never know. But you're getting down to those strange things. You're pulling out the bad pixels in the giant picture, right? Okay, so to build on that, if we take that same method And let's say you want to find the new things that show up each day, right? So you don't want to look at the same results every day. If maybe they're benign and you haven't whitelisted them yet, you want to know what pops up that you haven't seen before that matches all this criteria. So what you do is you output the results to a table. It's like a list, and it's a growing list. Every day, the results run, every hour, whatever, and you append them to a list. And then you're reporting on the same kind of logic, but you're adding in a clause that says, hey, it's not equal to the historical stuff I've seen. Therefore, it's brand new, at least since the time I started running this logic. So now you're finding the things that are new. Could be a brand newly registered domain. It could be just something no one's gone to before. But if we have 2.4 million associates in Walmart, right? If someone goes to a domain that no one's been to before and it's exhibiting that behavior, that's pretty unique, right? That's something we want to dig into. So anyway, so new ones start popping up. Now let's move on to a little bit more fun method. This one, again, requires asset tagging. There's a lot of work that goes into that. My team's done a great job. It's kind of it takes a long time. It's a kind of a journey. There's so many machines, and tagging them properly takes a lot of work. But it's worth it. The payoff is definitely worth it. So we're going to find behavioral anomalies within a particular type of asset, okay? Again, tagging is critical. So let's pick on protocols, all right? We're going to say select asset type, assuming asset.type is a field that has the type of machine that goes with the IP address and the protocol. So if you have NetFlow, or you can use port numbers. If you have full packets, you can do protocol. Again, this applies to just about anything you can think of, characteristic-wise. And we're going to do a count distinct, so how many distinct IP addresses are doing this protocol, where the asset type is US domain controller, okay? Just assuming you called your US domain controller as that. Here's what it could look like. All right, so I've got just a general, about 150 boxes. Obviously, how many I've got, let's say. This is the Space Needle example, right? The 150 boxes. They're all talking RPC, Kerberos, LDAP, HTTP is a little less, SSL less, and then, whoa, we got 2 that are talking SMB and 1 that's talking DNS. Okay, out of 150 domain controllers, wouldn't you think that's kind of a problem if one of your boxes is doing a single protocol? Probably not normal, right? They should be pretty standard, pretty static type devices. So those are ones you dig into. Again, this kind of abstracts you from, well, what is that? If I go, back here. SMB, well, it could be someone copying just a benign file from the box. Could be someone exfiltrating all the user hashes off the domain controller to an internal host, right? It could be WannaCry trying to spread. We don't know, right? The fact is it's acting differently than the rest. We'll dig into it. We'll figure out what it is, right? But don't lock yourself into defining, well, I'm going to only look for SMB from a domain controller and then wait and see if that fires. No. You go look at all the protocols, and it tells me which ones are not like the others, okay? So open it up a little bit more here. So instead of defining just the protocol, picking on the protocol they're talking, let's take it to the next level and define a whole lot of characteristics and have the system, the database, tell me what is the odd characteristic. There's anything else, okay? All right, so again, asset tagging and behavior tagging are critical here. Behavior meaning more of a characteristic, not like a specific bad behavior. So here's some examples, right? And the list can go on and on and on and on. But look at these and you go, okay, whatever it is, SSL self-signed search, HTTP direct to IP. You think of all the ways to define traffic. They don't have to be bad. I mean, direct to IP, we see that. It's not inherently bad. Proxy blocked traffic, that's a little more on the nefarious side. Traffic over non-standard ports, maybe you got HTTP running over 445 and SMB running over 80. Those kind of, if you have the logs to be able to tag that kind of activity, do it, all right? And tag as many things as you can think of. And this applies also to endpoints if you're collecting endpoint data. Now at the bottom here, So we're going to put all these into a field called traffic characteristics, all right? So in our made-up database table, traffic characteristics is what we're going to put these things in here. And they're going to have some logic that defines how these look on the network. And then we have one at the bottom here, IP address exists. Throw that in there because everything's going to trigger on that. That's kind of your key as to how many of this asset type do you have, period, right? No matter what kind of traffic they're transmitting. And so this is kind of your comparison to see, well, how rare is this other stuff compared to the total group. All right, so define as many as you can. All right, that's the key. In some systems, some solutions out there will already have a lot of this out of the box. You go buy, different NetFlow tools, packet inspection tools. They're going to have a lot of those characteristics already there. But I say define more, right? You kind of load it up with as many as you can. Okay, then what we're going to do is back to SQL here, selecting asset type, traffic characteristics, right? That's the field we want to pull from, and account distinct of IP source. Again, right? That's the common thing here. From packet logs, we'll say this is using packets where asset type is a US domain controller. Okay, so we're still pivoted on one asset type, but instead of just being a protocol, now we're looking at traffic characteristics and which of those are actually rare characteristics for a box in that group. Again, IP address exists, 150. That's all your domain controllers will say, right? And then below here are all the other characteristics that those domain controllers have. Most of them have a medium ratio payload, meaning there's as much transmitted as there is received. It's kind of an even flow. Session sizes are usually in a meg. And then it drops down a little bit. Right? 54 of those have smaller session sizes. Okay, maybe not too bad. 54, that's quite a few. And then it drops off drastically. HTTP direct IP, self-signed cert, host header contains a port, like a port specifier on the domain. 2 out of 150 are doing that. That's weird, right? And maybe they're all related to the same thing. Maybe this is 2 hosts that are both infected with something, calling out to a whatever :8080 IP address domain, and it's using a self-signed cert, right? So this is the kind of the thing we wouldn't have known to go look for specifically, maybe. But now that we're seeing these characteristics, hey, let's dig into that and see what that is without having to know to go look for that thing. So now let's take it to a little bit, this is where it gets more fun. We're taking off the whole part of the query where we're specifying the asset type. Forget that it's US domain controller. You have all your assets tagged. Let's just use that, right? We've got them all listed in a feed. So you got, whatever it is, ATM servers, R&D servers, payroll servers, whatever they are. Tag them as that, right? Now, whenever you do this kind of output, you're seeing grouped by the asset type, the characteristics. You order them descending from highest to lowest. So there's your domain controller example we used a second ago. But look, Exchange servers. We got 3 of them where we have RDP from a non-IT part of our network. Why is someone in accounting RDP to an Exchange server? Well, unless you want to go look for that specifically, you better define all the characteristics you can think of and then match them up to your assets and see where are the rarities, right? EXE copied to an asset. Let's see, of ATM machines, and you got 8 out of 4,500 that are talking IRC. 1 had a zip file copied from it. Because a zip file copied from asset, that is a characteristic. Now that applied to a file server, who cares? There's probably zip files all the time going back and forth. But hey, in this group of assets, that's a rare thing, okay? DNS servers got 1 talking HTTP, whereas the others are way higher. Point of sale controller, this is all made up numbers, by the way. But you got 2 that are talking to a proxy server and 1 talking direct to IP out of 3,751 of them, okay? Again, these are traffic characteristics that can apply to any asset, and you don't know which ones are exhibiting the rare things till you do these queries where you're doing the count of distinct IPs for any given characteristic. So the key to this is defining a multitude of behaviors. If you've got a product that already does that, great, use it. If you don't, then figure out ways to tag that traffic. And this whole method can apply to a lot of different kinds of artifacts. If you got a machine that's talking from a strange country in your network, let's say you got a China office and it's talking to a USA office, and it's only one box within a group of ATM machines or whatever it might be. Okay, that lateral movement can be a rare thing. So asset type, source and dest, maybe you've got, why is there a R&D server talking directly to an Exchange server for some reason? So you can start seeing those rare behaviors when you start plotting it out like we've done. It applies to a lot of things, right? The sky's the limit. If you have artifacts collected on your network or endpoints, you can do this method. It just requires putting it into a database and querying it the right way. So remember the light bulb at the top, the space needle at first, whenever I was talking, how that may have seemed like, holy cow, how in the world how do you find a rare behavior within this little tiny speck which represents 150 boxes in this massive network? And we've just walked through how you can do that, right? It's not super technical. It's just more of a different approach to using the numbers to your advantage, okay? And that's all I've got. Any questions?
Yeah. I had a question about, do you ever find there's a lot of noise in trying to determine what's benign versus rare when, say, development teams in your enterprise are rolling out a new feature that might not be well documented or broadcast? And If so, do you, what are strategies you use to try to pull that information to the top and weed out the noise?
Okay, yep, good question. So yes, we run across benign data all the time. That's kind of the painful learning curve in developing any of the logic that we use. What I find myself doing is going back in and tuning the logic to try to eliminate whatever that is. Because you say someone rolled something out you didn't know about, there could be a billion reasons why there's benign stuff in there. A lot of times it comes back to just apps that are unique, someone has that are calling out. Could be, for any given type of movement or behavior, there could be just tons of different reasons, right? But we quickly try to triage what is benign and figure out a way to exclude it without necessarily running down and go, well, why is that benign and showing up? Like, what, did someone roll something out? I don't go that far to figure that out. I just go, okay, I know this is not bad. I've got to tune my logic differently. And sometimes you can't tune the logic good enough, so you end up having to whitelist certain things. You go, well, okay, mostly this is useful data, but these few things I keep seeing, I'm just going to eliminate them from my view. I know that they're matching, but I don't want to see them. So we kind of take the approach of just tune and refine and filter. And if something is bad, of course, we triage that, but we don't spend as much time triaging, like, why is there a benign result? So, yes? I'm sorry, over here?
Hey, do you think that SSL decryption is becoming more of a necessity in order to find those rare events due to the rise of both users using personal VPN products as well as the advent of things like Let's Encrypt?
Yes, absolutely. We see things moving to SSL all the time, more and more. And so, yeah, decryption is going to give you the visibility to do things like some of the example C2 logic, right, where I was saying that, hey, there's no graphics files, there's no refer. Well, you can't do those kinds of things unless you're decrypting some things. And so, yeah, I definitely think that as time goes forward, that's going to become more and more of almost a requirement for doing decent threat hunting. There's things you can do with just SSL sessions purely, right? Look at a self-signed certs and just why is this destination, why are we going to a domain that was created 3 days ago? There's things you can do without that, especially combined with DNS lookups for the domains. But yeah, I'm a proponent of, decrypt, inspect, in a safe way, and then re-encrypt and send it on.
If you could write that down and give that to my C levels, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
When it comes to asset tagging, do you recommend an automated approach, or do you guys actually go through and define the assets that you want to have in your environment?
Very good question. Automation. If you can, right? There's some challenges. Some I would say some areas don't populate their list of whatever servers very well, and you got to go get a one-time grab, and you know that it's going to get out of date as they remove and add servers. But for the most part, I would say 90% of what we do is automated. Whether you're scraping everything in Active Directory, you're scraping your asset databases, put all that into a type of a feed and start using that to go, okay, this IP goes with this box. This box is this specific kind of box, and it also falls into a broader category. So tag the heck out of the assets in different ways so they're broadly tagged and more specific tagged. And then that's what allows you to, of course, do all the behavioral stuff. But yeah, automation is key if you can pull that off. I'll go over here.
Okay, so as far as deep packet inspection, if we're relying solely on that, with TLS 1.3 coming down, we're staring down that barrel, how do we account for the loss of deep packet inspection for things that we know or can we assume are okay? Is there a way for me to say, like, okay, this, if we're doing 1.3, then I'm going to say that's okay? How do we respond to that change?
That's a good question. And my mind goes to, instead of having to worry about that so much, maybe on your perimeter, figuring out where things are going and blocking them from more of a reputational perspective. Think in terms of like OpenDNS, right? Hey, I can't see inside this. I don't know it's bad, but it's known to be a command and control domain because someone else has had the luxury of knowing what that is. So that's kind of where at the turn, when it gets into things where you can't deal with the type of encryption that's being used, it's borderlines on reputational and then any other characteristics you can glean from it. So, and that goes for not just TLS, but I mean any kind of custom encryption, things that you just can't decipher. It's not my favorite area because it's frustrating to me, right, when that happens. But that's the approach I would take. And as much as I hate using like threat feeds, if you can find some reputable ones, or use a DNS screening provider so that someone's a little more I guess, vetting things better. That's one way to find things. That's happened for me. I run into things where it's like I can't tell it's encrypted, but you know what? It's being sinkhole out on the internet, and here's why, and it's a reputable vendor of that kind of a thing, and so that's kind of the approach we have to take. Some of those. Okay. Thanks.
So I'm more curious about where you kind of stand on the debate with like data volume versus a smart approach to processing the data when it comes to threat hunting. Because obviously you can have, too much volume with your threat hunting data that you can't process in a timely manner. So where do you stand on that?
So volume becomes a problem when you're wanting to do queries that span long periods of time, right? If you have a year of data, the chances that you want to go query that year of data compared to, I want to see what's happening in the last 24 hours, it's there, right? It's slower to pull back. But I would say the focus needs to be on looking at going forward in the last 24 hours, last hour, what is new and different than everything I've seen before, right? And so you're not necessarily querying everything before. You're just kind of keeping an index of the things that you've seen that match this pattern, and then let's see what's new compared to that. And by doing that, you're only querying short periods of time, right? You're not querying petabytes of data. You're querying just the last day, the last few hours worth. And that gets you also more real-time data. You can go, oh, you know what? We just had a machine talk out on a protocol that none of the other 40,000 machines like it were talking. And I don't have to go query his history for that. I just kind of keep a record of these are the protocols that are known to these boxes typically talk on, and this is a new one now. So it's a short list that you kind of maintain going forward.
So to build on the last question, with the amount of data that we do have, are you seeing approaches to use machine learning and AI algorithms to more and more filter and flag data that is benign versus malicious?
So, there's a lot of UBA type products out there, right? Machine learning and things like that. I haven't seen personally a lot of success with those types of technologies. Some people may have had great success with it. Personally, I haven't seen that. I'm more the approach of define it yourself, your own environment really well, learn what's normal, and figure out where the rare things are. To me, that's a little bit broader and more scalable and last the test of time type approach than some magical algorithm that someone says, this is a weird behavior. I mean, it could definitely help. The challenge is an environment this size, there's a lot of weird stuff that's normal, right? It just happens. Any large network you walk into, there's going to be strange behaviors and things that happen, and those can bubble up and they all look bad. Well, if everything's bad, nothing's bad, right? And so I'd rather focus on things that I know are anomalies and take that approach. So eventually, if that technology gets there, works really well, then sure, I'd love to try it out and see how it works. But for now, I think sticking to our own types of custom content is probably the way to go for now. So, anything else?
Awesome.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you.